lamang po ang QR code na nakalagay sa inyong mga screens. Again, this service is free of charge. Tulad po ng nabanggit kanina, our topic this morning is Deceptive Sales Act and Practices. To formally start our session for today, we would like to call the officer in charge of Consumer Advocacy Division, Consumer Policy and Advocacy Bureau, Ms. Vivian O. Alarcado. Good morning po, Ms. Bien. Hi, Ms. Bien. Naka-mute po kayo, ma'am.
Hello. Yan. Magandang umaga, Diana. Good morning, everyone, and welcome sa ating ika-253rd Consumer Care Webinar Series. So today, ating tatalakayin ang tungkol sa isa sa mga provisions ng Consumer Act of the Philippines or RA 7394, ang Deceptive Sales Acts and Practices. So una po sa lahat, dapat nating malaman kung ano ba ang Consumer Act of the Philippines at ang mga layunin nito. Ang Consumer Act ay isang batas na nagpoprotekta
Good morning po. Nagkakaroon lang po tayo ng internet connection problem po. Ayan, nandito na po ulit si Miss Vien. Miss Vien, please continue.
Yes, Diana. So, ulitin ko lang po, pasensya na po, nagkaroon lang ng konting technicality. So, ulitin ko lang po, ano po ba yung mga layunin ng ating Consumer Act? Isa po dito yung pagbibigay ng protection laban sa mga panganib sa kalusugan at kaligtasan, and then protection laban sa mga mapanlinlang, hindi patas at walang konsyensya ng mga gawain sa pagbebenta, magbigay ng information at education upang mapadali ang tamang pagpili ng wastong paggamit at mga karapatan ng isang mamimili. And then, provision ng sapat na karapatan at paraan ng pagtugon, paglahok ng mga kinatawan ng mga mamimili sa pagbalangkas sa mga patakarang panlipunan at pang-ekonomiya. So pangalawa naman po, ano naman ang deceptive sales acts and practices or ang mga mapanlinlang na gawain ng mga negosyante sa pagbebenta ng produkto o serbisyo. Isang example po nito ay ang pagbibigay ng maling information tungkol sa products and services na ibinebenta sa merkado. So I will not go into details. Mapalad po tayo at kasama natin si Attorney Benita Alejandro ng Adjudication Division ng Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau upang i-discuss further ang topic natin sa araw na ito. So sa ngalan po ng aming CPAB Directors, Attorney Marcos Valdez, the second at Attorney Cheryl Carbonell, nais ko pong kayong pasalamatan, pati na po ang ating speaker from FTEB. Muli, maraming salamat at magandang umaga po.
Maraming salamat po, Ms. Vien. And to echo Ms. Vien po, we are very fortunate to have with us this morning our very capable speaker from the Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau. She is an attorney of Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau Adjudication Division. Let us now welcome Attorney Maria Venida Alejandro. Good morning po, Attorney Venida. The floor is now yours. Good morning po, ma'am.
Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. To our host, the Consumer Policy and Advocacy Bureau, And to everyone present in this webinar, welcome and a pleasant day to all. We have an interesting topic for today. I understand there had been previous discussions on this topic before, but it is important that we keep ourselves abreast with new developments in consumer protection, especially now with the trend on online platform mode of purchasing, where many issues are being encountered. So before we start the ball rolling, let us have a quick walk with our Republic Act 7394, or the Consumer Act of the Philippines. Republic Act 7394 is known as the Consumer Act of the Philippines under Article 1, Title 1. It is the primary legislation which protects the rights and interests of the consumer. It was approved by Congress on April 13, 1992, and came into effect on July 15, 1992. And it consists of 173 articles divided into 6 titles. Okay. Article 2 of the Consumer Act clearly sets forth the policy of the state on consumer protection. It states, Article 2, Declaration of Basic Policy. It is the basic policy of the state to protect the interest of the consumer, promote his general welfare, and to establish standards of conduct for business and industry. Towards this end, the state shall implement measures to achieve the following objectives: protection against hazards to health and safety, protection against deceptive, unfair, and unconscionable acts and practices, provision on, this is our topic for today, provision on information and education to facilitate sound choice and the proper exercise of rights by the consumer, provision of adequate rights and means of redress, and involvement of consumer representatives in the formulation of social and economic policies. Next slide, please. This mantra is echoed in Article 48 of which states Declaration of Policy. The state shall promote and encourage fair, honest, and equitable relations among parties in consumer transactions and protect the consumer against deceptive, unfair, and unconscionable sales act and practices. Next slide, please. Article 49 simply states that the DTI is the implementing agency of this Deceptive Sales Act and practices. Okay. Under Article 50, Prohibition against Deceptive Sales Act or Practices. A deceptive act or practice by a seller or supplier in connection with a consumer transaction violates this act, whether it occurs before, during, or after the transaction. An act or practice shall be deemed deceptive whenever the producer, manufacturer, supplier, or seller, through concealment, false representation, or fraudulent manipulation, induces a consumer to enter into a sales or lease transaction of any consumer product or service. Next slide, please. From the introductory paragraph of Article 50, The following elements can be deduced as to what would constitute deceptive act and or practices. The elements of Article 50 are acts of inducement by the producer, manufacturer, supplier, or seller. Second is the subject of inducement is a consumer transaction involving a product or service. The third is inducement occurs before, during, or after the transaction. And the manner of inducement could be through concealment, false representation, and fraudulent manipulation. Without limiting the scope of the above paragraph, the act or practice of a seller or supplier is deceptive when it represents that, paragraph A consumer product or service has the sponsorship, approval, performance, characteristics, ingredients, accessories, uses, or benefits it does not have. Next slide, please. A consumer product or service is of a particular standard, quality, grade, style, or model, when in fact it is not. Under paragraphs A and B of Article 50, whenever a claim is made with regards to the sponsorship, characteristics, standard, etc., Dow 2 series of 1993 or the implementing rules and regulations of Republic Act 7394 requires that documents evincing such claim shall be made accessible for inspection by the department and upon reasonable request by a consumer. A good example would be when there is a claim of compliance to Philippine standard, a valid and current certificate from BPS, or an ICC certificate if the claim is compliant to the standard of a foreign country or entity. Next slide, please. Paragraph C, a consumer product is new, original, or unused when in fact it is in a deteriorated, altered, reconditioned, reclaimed, or second-hand state. According to Dow 2 series of 1993, where a product is sold or offered has already been used, but could still be used for the purpose for which it was made or produced, it shall be designated as second-hand. Absence of such designation as to its state, the seller shall be deemed to have declared that the same is brand new or has never been used. Next slide, please. Paragraph D, a consumer product or service is available to the consumer for a reason that is different from the fact. As can be seen on our sample image, the room is being advertised with a nice view, well-maintained, a pleasant place to stay or spend your vacation. But in reality, the furnitures are broken, the electricity wirings spell danger and risk, the walls are cheap, and no beautiful view. So if the advertised photo was your major consideration in booking with the hotel, and the actual scenario is grossly and substantially different, it may be considered as deceptive sales act or practice. Paragraph E, a consumer product or service has been supplied in accordance with the previous representation when in fact it is not. In paragraph E, there is misrepresentation which in a plethora of jurisprudence is associated with fraud and is defined as a false representation of a material fact by one of the parties to the other, tending directly to induce the other to enter into the contract. Hence, when what is presented is significantly different from the actual object, there is again a presumption of deceptive act and or practice. Paragraph F, a consumer product or service can be supplied in a quantity greater than the supplier intends. As an example, you ordered and paid 100 pieces of giveaways for your birthdays. The delivery receipt states that the quantity of the delivered items is 100. Yet, upon actual receipt and counting, the goods was only 96 pieces. Another example, as illustration, what appears in the ad is a delivery van, and the consumer is now asking whether the goods he purchased, which is quite voluminous, is to be delivered by a truck or van. However, the seller informed him that it can only be done by a motorbike. Next slide, please. Paragraph G, a service or repair of a consumer product is needed when in fact it is not. Example, an aircon unit was brought for repairs. Upon examination, the service provider informed the consumer that there is a need to purchase a part for installation, when in fact, what the aircon needs is only thorough cleaning. Next slide, please. Paragraph H, a specific price advantage of a consumer product exists when in fact it does not. I bought a mouse for 499 pesos. The next day, it was advertised as buy one take one with a selling price of 999. While the consumer is made to believe that there is a price advantage, in truth, there isn't any. Next slide, please. Paragraph I, the sales or practice involves or does not involve a warranty, a disclaimer of warranties, particular warranty terms or other rights, remedies or obligations if the indication is false. You ordered a YSL bag worth 50K. Upon delivery, the white card is not included, and it is this white card in every original YSL bag which proves its authenticity. Next slide, please. The seller or supplier has a sponsorship, approval, or affiliation it does not have. In paragraphs A and B, the sponsorship, approval, or affiliation pertains to consumer products or services, while in paragraph J, it pertains to the seller or supplier. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we have the summation of the matters concealed or misrepresented under Article 50. Article 51 speaks of the non-exclusivity of paragraphs A to J of Article 50. Next slide, please. Other prohibitions against deceptive acts or practices. Under DOW number 2 series of 1993, the IRR of RA 7394. The appearance of the product shall not be unreasonably enhanced as to deceive consumers on their true characteristics or condition. Fraudulent tricks shall not be employed in the demonstration of the performance of a consumer product or service. Should there be change in the supply of a product such that it cannot be supplied to the extent promised, information immediately be made to the buyer. And the last is prohibition on no return, no exchange policy. Next slide, please. The landmark case under in Article 50 is Autocentrum Alabang Incorporated versus Spouses Bernardo, DTI, Asian Carmakers Corporation, and BMW, GR number 214122, promulgated on June 8, 2016, where the Supreme Court pronounced that RA 7394 specifically provides that an act of a seller is deceptive when it represents to a consumer that a product is new, original, or unused, when in fact it is deteriorated, altered, reconditioned, reclaimed, or secondhand. A representation is not confined to words or positive assertions. It may consist as well of deeds, acts, or articrafts of a nature calculated to mislead another and thus allow the fraud-feasor to obtain an undue advantage. Failure to reveal a fact which the seller is, in good faith, bound to disclose may generally be classified as a deceptive act due to its inherent capacity to deceive. Suppression of a material fact which a party is bound in good faith to disclose is equivalent to a false representation. Next slide, please. A case where the defendant repainted an automobile, worked it over to resemble a new one, and represented that the automobile being sold was new, was found to be a false representation of an existing fact. And if it was material and induced the plaintiff to accept something entirely different from that which she had contracted for, it clearly was a fraud, which, upon its discovery and a tender of the property back to the seller, entitled the plaintiff to rescind the trade and recover the purchase money. Moreover, by claiming that its initial intention was for the car to be used by one of its executive officers, Autocentrum effectively admitted ownership of the car prior to its purchase by Spouses Bernardo. Autocentrum failed to present evidence that its intention did not occur. On the other hand, Autocentrum's registration of the car under its name and Campilan's letter bolstered the fact that the car was pre-owned and used by Autocentrum. For failure to reveal its prior registration of the car in its name and for representing an altered and second-hand car as a brand new to Spouses Bernardo, Autocentrum committed a deceptive sales act in violation of Section 50 of Republic Act 7394. Next slide, please. We will now go to Article 52, Unfair or Unconscionable Sales Act or Practice. An unfair or unconscionable sales act or practice by a seller or supplier in connection with a consumer transaction violates this chapter whether it occurs before, during, or after the consumer transaction. An act or practice shall be deemed unfair or unconscionable whenever the producer, manufacturer, distributor, supplier, or seller, by taking advantage of the consumer's physical or mental infirmity, ignorance, illiteracy, lack of time, or the general conditions of the environment or surroundings, induces the consumer to enter into a sales or lease transaction grossly inimical to the interest of the consumer or grossly one-sided in favor of the producer, manufacturer, distributor, supplier, or seller. Next slide, please. Under Article 52, the elements of unconscionable sales act or practice are the acts of inducement are done by the producer, manufacturer, supplier, or seller. The subject of inducement is a consumer transaction involving a product or service. The transaction is grossly inimical to the consumer's interest or grossly one-sided in favor of the other party or the seller. The inducement occurs before, during, or after the transaction, and the manner of inducement could be through abuse or act of taking advantage of any of the following conditions: the consumer's physical or mental infirmity, ignorance or illiteracy, consumer's lack of time, and the general conditions of the environment or surroundings. Next slide, please. In determining whether an act or practice is unfair and unconscionable, the following circumstances shall be considered. Paragraph A, that the producer, manufacturer, distributor, supplier, or seller took advantage, of the inability of the consumer to reasonably protect his interests because of his inability to understand the language of an agreement or similar factors. Next slide, please. Paragraph B, that when the consumer transaction was entered into, the price grossly exceeded the price at which similar products or services were readily obtainable in similar transaction by like consumers. Next slide, please. Paragraph C, that when the consumer transaction was entered into, the consumer was unable to receive a substantial benefit from the subject of the transaction. Next slide, please. That when the consumer transaction was entered into, the seller or supplier was aware that there was no reasonable probability or payment of the obligation in full by the consumer. Next slide, please. And the last is that the transaction that the seller or supplier induced the consumer to enter into was excessively one-sided in favor of the seller or supplier. Next slide, please. Hence, the factors to be considered in determining unfair or unconscionable sales act and practices is summed up as follows. Consumers' inability to understand the language of the agreement or similar factors, grossly excessive price compared to that of similar products or services, no substantial benefit from the product service purchase, seller is aware of reasonable improbability to pay in full, and last, transaction was excessively one-sided in favor of the seller or supplier. Next slide, please. Rules on certain sales acts and practices under DAO number 2, series of 1993. Sale by sample. The sample use shall be essentially the same as the consumer product or service being sold. Second is sale by description. The description shall be accurate and shall indicate all the essential features of such product or service. Next slide, please. Rules on consumer service firms under DAO number 2, series of 1993. Any service firm shall not represent that it has certain facility, amenity, unless the same is actually available. If the same is out of order, the consumer shall be informed of such fact before the consumer transaction is entered into. Second, Any repair for damage or injury caused by the service firm shall be paid for by the service firm, whether or not the repair is undertaken by it or by another firm. In case of loss due to the fault of the service firm, the consumer shall be reimbursed for its fair market value at the time of the injury or damage. The landmark case for Article 52 is Iowa Electronic Philippines Incorporated versus Department of Trade and Industry, NCR, GR number 189655, promulgated on April 13, 2011. The Supreme Court laid down this ruling. In this regard, we quote with affirmation and accord respect to the factual findings of the Court of Appeals, to wit, Iowa, in employing the sales scheme described by customers in their complaints in order to entice customers to purchase its products, clearly violated Article 52 of the Consumer Act of the Philippines. In doing so, Iowa, a seller, through its representatives stationed usually in malls, entice consumers into purchasing their products by taking advantage of the latter's physical or mental infirmity, ignorance, illiteracy, lack of time, or the general conditions of the environment or surroundings. This is done by misrepresenting to the consumer that she has won a gift or is to receive some giveaways, when in truth, these gifts can only be claimed or received upon purchase of an additional product or products, again misrepresented by Iowa to be of high quality. This is how Iowa operates its business, and not simply as a means of promotional sale. The act sought to be avoided and punished under the Consumer Act has certainly been committed by Iowa. Next slide, please. Okay, that concludes the presentation. Hope the discussion was able to enlighten us with regards as to what constitutes deceptive sales act and practices. Thank you very much.
Ayan, thank you po for that insightful presentation, Attorney Venida. Good morning po ulit sa ating mga participants here in Zoom and to everyone joining us via DTI Consumer Care Facebook and DTI Philippines YouTube. Let us now proceed with our question and answer portion. Short reminder lamang po sa ating mga participants to stay muted unless you are addressing the speaker and or moderator directly. Please be also informed na makakapag-download po kayo ng copy ng presentation material after you accomplish the client satisfaction form or the CSF form. That will be posted in the chat box section. Para naman po maging interactive ang ating question and answer portion, we encourage everyone to click the raise hand button so we can call you to ask directly to our speaker. Pwede rin pong isend ang inyong question sa chat box. Ayan, habang wala pong nagre-raise hand, magbabasa po muna tayo ng questions online. Attorney Venida po, question from Kolishi. Is the International Trade Act applied in Asian or worldwide? Any comment po, Attorney? Nawala siya.
Oo nga eh.
Sa mga nagtatanong po, paantay lang po, muli po namin kukontakin si Attorney Venida. Nawala lang po siya dito sa ating Zoom. Para po sa ating mga participants, magpe-play po muna kami ng video while connecting po again to Attorney Venida. Sana po makapag-stay po muna kayong lahat and para makapag-proceed po tayo sa question and answer portion. Maraming salamat po.
Ang tunay na pangalan ng mga tao, lugar at organisasyon sa liham na tampok sa palabas na ito ay pinalitan at binago. Ang anumang pagkakahawig ng mga bagong pangalan sa aktwal na tao, lugar o organisasyon ay hindi sinasadya at nagkataon lamang.
Magandang araw mga consumer. Tuwing Pasko, bagong taon o anumang espesyal na okasyon ay naging pangkaraniwang regalo na ang gift check o gift certificates. Meron ka bang mga gift checks na hindi nagamit ng mga nakaraang taon? Maaari mo pa ba itong gamitin? Ngayong linggo sa Dear Consumer Care, isang katanungan tungkol sa Gift Check Act ang ating sasagutin mula kay Ginoong Tagle. Dear Consumer Care, palagi akong nag-grocery at gift check ang madalas kong pambayad. Laking gulat ko na lamang nung ako ay nag-grocery sa isang supermarket at hindi tinanggap ang gift check na aking pambayad dahil ito ay na-issue noon pang 2019. Sabi sa akin ng kahera, hindi raw sila tumatanggap ng lumang gift check o yung mga hindi na nagamit ng mga nakaraang taon. Tama po ba ito? At para sagutin ang katanungan ni Ginoong Tagle, kasama natin ngayon ang Assistant Division Chief ng Consumer Advocacy Division ng Consumer Policy and Advocacy Bureau, Ms. Vivian Alarcado. Magandang araw po, Ms. Vien.
Magandang araw mga consumers at magandang araw Ms. Dens.
Ms. Vien, bago po natin sagutin ang katanungan ni Ginoong Tagle, maaari niyo po bang ibahagi sa amin kung ano itong Gift Check Act?
Alam mo Dens, ayon sa Republic Act No. 10962 o ang Gift Check Act of 2017, ang gift check, gift certificate, or gift card ay anumang instrumento gaya ng papel, card o code na binibigay sa isang consumer na kailangang igalang ng isang establishment o tindahan na nagbigay nito bilang kabayaran sa produkto o serbisyo. Dagdag pa rito, ang pag-issue ng gift check na may expiration ay ipinagbabawal.
Kabilang po ba sa Gift Check Act ang coupon o voucher?
Ang mga instrumento na issue sa ilalim ng loyalty o promotional discount, gaya ng rewards, coupons at vouchers, ay hindi sakop ng Gift Check Act. Kaya naman, ito ay maaaring naglalaman ng expiration dates at ang paggamit nito ay sumusunod sa mga alituntunin at kondisyong ibinigay ng tindahan or establishment.
Pero paano po ba natin malalaman kung ang instrument ay voucher o coupon?
Bukod sa ang voucher o coupon ay in-issue sa ilalim ng loyalty o promotional discount, Ito ay nagtataglay ng mga katagang loyalty or reward o kaya ay may promo permit number at expiration date.
Sa kaso po ni Ginoong Tagle, ano po kaya ang maaari nating maipayo sa kanya?
Makabubuting suriin ni Ginoong Tagle ang instrumentong kanyang hawak at kung ito ay hindi voucher o coupon, ito ay hindi dapat nagtataglay ng expiration date. Kung ganoon, responsibility ng issuer na palitan ang mga ito ng walang gasto sa parte ng consumer. Sakaling tumanggi ang issuer ng gift checks na ito ay palitan, siya ay maaari ng mag-file ng complaint o i-report ito sa DTI Provincial o Regional Office sa kanyang lugar o mag-email sa Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau. Ang proseso ng pag-file ng complaint ay makikita rin sa DTI website www.dti.gov.ph.
Kaya mga consumer, tandaan, ang pag-issue ng gift check na may expiration ay pinagbabawal. Ngunit kung ito ay loyalty o promotional discount gaya ng rewards, coupons at vouchers, ay hindi ito sakop ng batas. Kaya naman, ito ay maaaring maglaman ng expiration dates. Maraming salamat, Ms. Bien.
Walang anuman, Ms. Denz.
At yan ang kabuuan ng ating programa sa araw na ito. Paalala lamang po ng impormasyon na aming naibigay ay base lamang sa aming natanggap na salaysay at mga pangyayari na inilahad ni Ginoong Tagle. Abangan muli ang Dear Consumer Care sa susunod na linggo. Ito po si Denzel Bonal na nagsasabing, wais ang consumer na may alam. Para sa updates, please like, follow, subscribe to our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube accounts. That's DTI Consumer Care and DTI Philippines.
Ang tunay na pangalan ng mga tao, lugar at organisasyon sa liham na tampok sa palabas na ito ay pinalitan at binago. Ang anumang pagkakahawig ng mga bagong pangalan sa aktwal na tao, lugar o organisasyon ay hindi sinasadya at nagkataon lamang.
Magandang araw mga consumer. Sabi nila, biyaya ang bawat taon sa buhay ng tao. Habang tumatanda, mas natututo at mas nagiging matatag tayo sa mga hamon ng buhay. Kasama ng kanilang edad, ang karunungan at kakayahan na nililang ng panahon. Kaya naman, pinapahalagahan ng gobyerno ang mga senior citizen. Bilang pagtanaw sa kanilang kontribusyon, sila ay may mga pribilehiyong itinakda ng batas. Ano nga ba ang mga pribilehiyo para sa kanila?
Hello
Good
po.
morning po again to all
Okay.
our participants. We will now proceed po with our question and answer portion. Nandito na po muli si Attorney Benida Alejandro. Good morning po, Attorney.
Good morning po. To join me in the question and answer portion is our Division Chief, Attorney Joseph Manuel Pamitan. And could you please repeat the question, ma'am?
Okay, ma'am, I will repeat the question. Question po from Ko Lishi. Is the International Trade Acts applied in Asians or worldwide, ma'am?
Yung question is a bit vague. No? Yung topic natin today is about yung Consumer Act of the Philippines in relation to Article 50 and 52 on deceptive sales and unconscionable sales after practice. If ang question niya if the question pertains to whether or not yung mga transactions pertaining to foreign entities, no, the law says na if the transaction is partly consummated sa Pilipinas, in our jurisdiction din, yung mga transactions na are covered under the law. So, redress can be made by DTI. However, the only challenge there is enforcing yung decision against foreign entities. That's why CDTI, for that matter, has always been advising the public to only only transact with entities that has parang presence in the Philippines. Like say, for example, yung mga online platforms, even if the sellers under the online platforms are situated outside the Philippines, but considering that the platforms are in the Philippines, so we can enforce yung judgment against the platforms, even if the sellers are foreign entities too. So yun, yeah, but the question's a bit vague insofar as the law being referred to, but insofar as the consumer act, yes. And also, a bit of information lang, no? Not related to the topic, but just recently the President signed the Internet Transactions Act, which now clearly covers mga foreign entities who are doing business in the Philippines. So that's a clear statement, no? But the laws, while the laws being signed, no, there's yes, yet to take effect considering that there's an 18-month moratorium. So, I hope that answers the question.
Maraming salamat po, Attorney Pamitan. We hope po na clear ang concern ni Mr. or Ms. Colucci. And now may nagre-raise hand po. Avely, you may unmute po to question po, to ask directly po sa ating speaker. Hello po.
Hello, naririnig po ako?
Clear naman po, ma'am. You may proceed, ma'am, with your question.
Attorney, may tanong na po sana kasi ako. Tatlo po. Una po is sa mga food, ano na kasi natin, sa mga food delivery service. May nangyari kasi sa akin na ganito. Hindi ko natanggap yung portion ng product nung binili ko, and they process a refund. Kaso I specifically asked na refund na ibalik sa GCash ko. Pero ang ginawa nila is they just issued me a voucher na merong expiration, which is hindi ko nagamit. So, is it allowed? Pangalawa po, bumili ako ng concert ticket before pandemic, and it was not tawag dito, hindi natuloy yung concert. So I was asking for a refund. However, yung palang pinambayad ko doon is yung luma kong debit card, which is non-existent na nung panahon na yon. So gusto nila is dumaan pa ako sa process ng, ayun nga, yung affidavit of loss and all that para sa refund. Kahit na nasa akin yung ticket, nasa akin naman lahat, tama naman lahat ng sinabi ko kung saan binili yung tickets and all. Tama po ba yun? Is it deceptive practice yung mga ganong klaseng refund? Kasi parang ayaw talaga nilang ibalik kung tutuusin. And meron po bang expiration ng pag-issue ng refund talaga dapat?
All right. Sorry. On the first question, normally if there's a case that's filed sa DTI and and our refund is ordered, we normally say na dapat you have to pay in a legal tender. So dapat either cash yan or check or any acceptable yung vouchers normally are not allowed, especially if the voucher is limited in terms of use. No? Like say for example, bibigyan ka ng voucher, dito mo lang magagamit. So I think bawal yun dapat. The refund should be like kung pera yung bayaran ka dapat in cash or in check or sabi ko in legal tender. Yun. Kasi the reason why it's not allowed is because if it's in a mode na not legal tender, there's a limitation as to where you can use that particular money. So dapat yung ibibigay nila sa'yo is the same one prior to dun sa transaction. On the second question, normally normally po we should have to follow yung yung process nila doon sa refund, no. I think minsan kasi it's not really yung what I'm saying is there's a procedure so far as refund is concerned. So we just have to follow yung instructions nila on dun sa refund. So you were saying na wala na yung debit card mo, parang gano'n, no, na that you use to ano. So I think pagka ganyan naman, if you have communicated it to them, they would have to find a way dapat na nabayaran ka in cash. But if this normally, no, lahat po nung, if these are brought to DTI po, normally we what we say in our decision is we order normally a refund in such cases. But we say now you always have to pay in legal tender. Yung dun sa example niyo po kasi that you bought tickets, yung pandemic naman is like a fortuitous event naman po. So it's sa atin, whether or not it's deceptive sales, parang based on dun sa based on the limited information that you have, there was no, it was not really deceptive sales because even if they wanted to comply with your obligation so far as the concert is concerned, but considering that there were restrictions before on going out and having all these activities issued by the government, so parang they're excused, but they should not be excused in granting the refund, and in granting the refund, it should always be in legal tender.
I see. Will there be ano po, aside po sa email, kasi nag-ano na rin ako tawag dito, nag-try na rin akong tumawag, wala talagang sumasagot kasi sa FTEP na and also sa email.
Ma'am, ano po, yung office namin is open Mondays to Fridays, no? 8 to 5. So, while we do not suggest talaga na walk-ins because meron tayong consumer care at tgi.gov.ph. You can always file yung complaint nyo po doon. Once you file it there, we will act on doon sa complaints na po na yun. We have a process called mediation. After we receive yung complaint, we send out the notice of mediation, we conduct mediation, and then after that, if the parties will not reach any settlement, what we do is we advise the complainant to formally file a complaint with the adjudication, and then after a few days, we'll be able to come up with a decision. And normally, if we find the complaint to be valid, we will order a refund or a replacement or repair as the case may be, whatever is warranted under the circumstances.
I see. Sige po. Mag-i-email na lang po ulit ako siguro by today regarding my complaints po dun sa dalawang company. Okay lang po ba?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Siguro, if you can, if you can put yung chat mo, if you can put yung email address mo on the chat box, probably send sa mga, you can not send yung details mo on the chat box where everybody can see, but if you can send that, probably those organizers dito, sa SIPA perhaps, and then they can forward us your email. What we will do is we'll send you a link where you can find yung complete mo, and so it will be addressed immediately.
Okay, thank you po.
Again, thank you po, Miss Avely and Attorney Pamitan. Sa mga gusto pa pong magtanong, kindly click the raise hand button so we can call you to ask directly po to our speaker. At kung wala pa naman pong nag-raise hand, we'll proceed po to our questions online. Thank you po. Attorney, for our next question po from SD Glenn Corpus. Is it considered deceptive like the posting in the FB marketplace wherein the seller puts some 20 or 5 or even 3, but when you message it was 20K for that and 5K for that 5? Any answer po, Attorney?
Sorry, I think the violation there is not so much na deceptive sales, but not deceptive sales because hindi pa na-consummate yung transaction, but that person making advertisements will be liable for what, number one, liable for misleading advertisements perhaps, because we always have to be truthful dun sa advertisement. Number two, they could be liable for dun sa price tag violation because um, ang tawag dito, yung selling, the law under the Consumer Act, there's a clear obligation on the part of the sellers to be truthful and to be ang tawag dito, straightforward insofar as the pricing is concerned. So wala kang price tag, then that's a violation. And also, pag halimbawa, but it can be deceptive sales kung, if for example, if on the advertisement nakalagay nung binili mo na mas mahal na siya, and then that can also be a deceptive sales. Kasi but there is a discrepancy in terms of what was advertised and what was actually paid by the consumers. But that Article 50 comes in when there's a consumer transaction. But if there's no transaction yet, the seller can be liable for price tag law under the price tag law and misleading advertisement. It's also a provision under the Consumer Act.
Thank you again, Attorney, for answering that question. May nag-raise hand po, si Consumer Affair Raquel. You may unmute, ma'am. Hello, Ms. Raquel.
Hello,
You may
yes.
unmute
Good morning
po.
po.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yes. Tungkol po dun sa mga online, like sa mga Facebook, yung mga market nila doon. Once na nag-order po kasi sila at nakarating na yung parcel at mali yung mga products na dumating sa delivery, once na binalikan nila sa FB, wala na po yung online seller. Hindi na nila ma-question kung bakit mali yung products, yung gano'n. So wala nang paghabulan yung mga consumer. Paano po kaya yun?
Una po, what we sa DTI, no, what we normally do if we receive these kinds of complaints is we try to coordinate with yung other government agencies, like for example, the CICC of the Department of Information and Communication Technology, or even with the Philippine National Police cybercrime ko, no? That's what we do. Why? Because they have the capacity and capability to track yung mga nagbebenta ng ganito. So, but if you look based doon sa limited po na facts that you said, normally the people who are doing this are not real sellers na in contemplation of the consumer. These are normally parang more considered as a violation ng revised penal code on estafa, because dito yung other party has really no intention of selling, but it's really to defraud yung consumers natin. So that's why si DTI po normally we strongly and then suggest and remind consumers to transact only with the legitimate na marketplaces and legitimate na platforms, and those really na alam natin na mayroong existing din na brick and mortar stores, so that we know who to run after. Normally kasi sa Facebook, so we don't know yung mga address nila, and sometimes si Facebook or Meta for that matter is not really that cooperative, no? But again, we're very hopeful na with the internet transactions, we will be able to compel yung mga online platforms or even marketplaces we can compel them now to be more perhaps cooperative, because under the new law there are severe penalties. So yun.
Yes, it's true, oo. Kahit nga yung mga ibang mga consumer or yung mga mahilig mag-purchase sa mga online po, sinasabihan na nga na like sa Shopee or sa Lazada lang mag-order. But sometimes, itong si FB na parang ang ganda-ganda ng ano nila, ng presentation nila, na nagkakaroon ng interest mag-order. Pero yun na nga, once na na-order na, wala na, iba na yung product na dumadating po sa kanila. Or kung yun man yung product, less na po yung quality. And then hindi na nila mabalikan, hindi na po sila makapagreklamo or whatever. So yun lang po, hoping lang po na itong FB market ay ma-supervise din po kung papaano man, we don't know how.
Ayun po, gaya po nung sinabi ko, no, but we'll wait until po yung effectivity talaga ng internet transactions act, because I think that's one of the things that the internet transactions act seeks to regulate also. So we're very hopeful na with the new law, all these problems will be properly addressed.
Yes po. And then I'd also like to commend DTI kasi meron din po akong mga in-email sa DTI na pangit na products and then nabalik naman po sa akin. Nakuha ko naman yung request ko. Maraming salamat po, DTI.
Maraming salamat din po, Ma'am Raquel and Attorney Pamitan for answering the question. Mag-proceed po tayo ulit sa ating susunod na question from online po. Question po from Mr. Bersuelo Garcia from DTI 4B, Region 4B. Any proactive approach being undertaken by DTI to prevent the rampant or obvious deceptive sales act in our online platform? Baka mas marami ng bogus seller or product sa e-commerce platform kesa sa legit. Very easy to check for being too good to be true. Any comment po or answer, attorney?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Garcia. I think DTI as a what the one action that DTI did in order to address itong concerns na so is yung passage po, no? DTI has been spearheaded the passage of the Internet Transactions Act. So again, in the Internet Transactions Act, it's now very clear that there's a requirement on seller registration, yung platforms now has clear liabilities. Under the new law, no? Sorry, it's a part of the, but it's para lang to answer I do not want to dwell on the Internet Transactions Act, but to give you only an example of what DT has been doing, and sabi ko, it's the passage of the Internet Transactions Act. Under the Internet Transactions Act, one of the powers given to the Secretary of the DTI is on the power of takedown and blacklisting. So basically now, with the when the law takes effect, no, after 18 months since it's signing by the president. So actually, it's already a signed law, but we're waiting for the IRR and some other things that needs to be done. But I think what's important there is that there's now power by the DTI Secretary to take down, meaning we can now take down yung mga websites that sells itong mga sinasabi ni Mr. Garcia na, like, for example, violative, prohibited products or even fake products for that matter. Also blacklisting and all that stuff. So marami ng powers na yun yung DTI Secretary that he can use. So yung sabi ko, take down, which has never been done before. So sabi ko, taking down of the website, blacklisting so that these online sellers can no longer sell or be allowed to sell. I think these are the proactive stance of DTI in so far as protecting consumers. So yeah, but I'm sorry, I cannot discuss because I'm not sorry, I cannot say na I'm an expert on the Internet Transactions Act, but just to mention a few provisions of the law on so far as and sabi ko nga, it's a law that DTI really pinaghirapan, I would say, for its passage. So yun.
Salamat po, Attorney Pamitan. Naka-raise hand po si Sir Verse. You may unmute po, sir. If you have any additional concerns po or questions, sir.
Yes po, good morning po. Thank you, Attorney Pamitan, dun sa pagsagot. Ano lang, follow up lang. Ito in relation dun sa Article 50 na sinasabi natin kasi 'di ba especially itong letter B na ang dami natin nakita sa sabi natin sa Lazada, sa Shopee, sa Marketplace. Ang daming mga bogus na doon, kitang-kita natin sila na easy to detect kasi mga too good to be true yung prices nila. ganun ba? Wala ba talaga tayong ano doon? Kasi in relation dun sa, related itong Article 50, dun sa Article 110, ito naman yung false deceptive or misleading advertisement. So wala ba tayong pwedeng maging gawin? Kasi ang nakikita ko lang na pwede nating i-regulate ito, hindi ba talaga sila pwedeng mag-apply ng sales promo? Kasi usually yun ang kanilang pang-engganyo sa sa tao na kami ay naka-promo kaya bagsak ang presyo namin. So, exempted ba talaga sila sa pag-apply ng sales promo permit? Ito mga nasa online seller.
No, no, sir. I think the regulations very clear. So for us, any seller doing the promotional activities are required under the Consumer Act to first obtain a promotion permit before conducting such activity. Number two, sir. Well, in relation po kasi minsan doon sa I think DTI, FTEB for that matter, no, the Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau has been doing online sweep po. So we have a dedicated team sa FTEB, a certain number of people na scouring yung internet and checking, no. So we have had a lot of SEOs, show cause orders, or even notice of violation sent sa mga online platforms for selling this. But ang challenge kasi minsan natin if the products are fake, no. Number one kasi we need sometimes the cooperation of the brand owners, because it's only the brand owners who can say that the product is fake or counterfeit, no, counterfeit products. We normally need yung testimony nila or a certification from their end of that. But again, you're correct that when the price is too good to be true, and when there's also no sales promotion permit, which obviously leads us to the conclusion that either the product is counterfeit or not. But again, for purpose of claiming that the product is counterfeit, we would have to obtain evidence that such is not really a product. And normally, the brand owners are not cooperative in terms of getting yung certificate na yun that we require. But I think, sir, sabi ko nga again, with ngayon naman, FTEB is doing something na sabi ko, we're discarding the internet for mga ganito na mga too good to be true or ano, and sabi ko nga, we have had letters, plenty letters with platforms. So normally, I think yung platforms are a bit cooperative also insofar as taking down yung mga products, like for example, in terms of vape products or being sold on the internet, and if we see that there's a violations, when we call them out, they normally voluntarily take down yung mga advertisements nito. Yes, but I think sabi ko nga, sir, with the internet transactions, perhaps yung actions would be more drastic perhaps in the future. Yun. But we're not helpless kasi in the past naman we've penalized Shopee, we've penalized yung Lazada for violations of the Consumer Act.
Thank you po again, Sir Garcia, Sir Bers, and Attorney Pamitan. May nag-raise hand po ulit. Alliance of Study Sipa Kunsa. You may unmute po to raise your concern or your question po.
Hello po, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. May ano lang po kami, gusto lang po kaming hingi ng tulong din. Kami po ay galing sa Camarines Sur National High School, Alliance of Student Consumers. So gumawa po kami ng isang organisasyon sa loob ng school namin para maprotektahan din po yung mga student consumer. Ngayon po, may mga cases din na ang mga estudyante kapag bumibili ng mga produkto sa loob ng school, ay nakakatanggap din po sila ng mga deceptive products. And syempre, bilang isang mga estudyante at mga bata pa, pag minsan hindi nila alam kung anong gagawin, keso takot doon sa binilhan, na sabihin ganito yung produkto. So ngayon po, since na meron kaming organization, tapos pwede rin lumapit yung mga bata sa student leaders na mga officers nitong student consumers organizations na to. Ang concern lang po namin is ano po yung may advice po niyo sa amin since if ever po na hindi man makipag-cooperate yung store owner regarding dun sa issue ng isang estudyante. So, ano yung pwede po namin gawin para po diyan? Iyon po yung tanong po namin. Ano po yung pwedeng maging advice po niyo sa amin? Since na nakipag-usap na po kami sa store owner then still parang parang considered as sold. So, ganun po.
Yung Consumer Act no RA 7394 lays down the mechanism for filing consumer complaints po no. And ang gagawin niyo po lang talaga is yun, meron po kami yung consumer care at dti.gov.ph. It's a website. It's where you can send po yung complaints po ninyo. So, sabi ko nga kanina earlier, meron tayong proseso. So, once na may nag-file kayo ng reklamo sa amin, we're obligated under the law to act on yun sa complaint. Ang ginagawa ng DTI, pinapatawag natin or tinatawagan natin ng concern. We call the attention of the seller. And afterwards, we set a mediation. Sabi, pag-usapin namin kayo in the hope na the issue will be addressed by both parties amicably. So if it's not settled amicably, may proseso tayo, which is yung filing ng complaint. At sabi ko nga, under the rules, 15 days after the case is submitted for resolution, maglalabas po si DTI ng decision saying whether or not there is liability on the part of the seller o wala. Ngayon, kung halimbawa, si consumer talaga iniloko, so violation siya ng Article 50 and Article 52 of the Consumer Act. So, ang mangyayari doon, kailangan niya magbayad or sabi nga natin 3 hours refund, repair, please. So if he does not follow, DTI meron tayong power of to garnish accounts. So, pwede natin kunin yung kunin yung mga pera sa mga bank accounts nila para mabayaran yung refund ng consumer, ganun po. Or in that, kung hindi naman pwede natin silang pwersahin na bayaran sa kahit sa gusto nila. Meron po tayong galing na klase ng mekanismo for consumer redress. And it's up and running na po. So it has been tested. So gaya nga nung nabanggit nung ma'am kanina na question, natulungan na po siya ng DTI. So it's the same process po that you have to go through. So file a complaint and then we'll act on it.
Okay po, maraming salamat po, attorney. Ipapaalam po namin yan sa mga estudyante para alam po nila kung paano po mag-file ng complaint. At the same time din po, maging aware yung mga nagtitinda po sa loob ng school or whether yung sa labas na kapag mali talaga yung product na naibenta nila, ipagbigyan nila yung consumer kasi consumer naman po ay nagbayad. Sige po, maraming salamat po sa inyo.
Sorry, balikan ko lang. So, meron kaming email, yung consumercare@dti.gov.ph. So, yung reklamo nyo po, isulat nyo lang po doon and sigurado po yan na sasagutin po kayo ng DTI.
Ayos.
Apo. So, yun. Also, meron din po kaming website na pwede kayong mag-log on doon and meron po yung tinatawag natin na CARES system it's a DTI Consumer Complaints Assistance and Resolution System. DTI, CARE system ang tawag po doon. It's on the DTI website po siya. So it's an online dispute resolution system po. So yun, those are, so either you can email us at Consumer Care or you go to dun sa website po to file a complaint. So very, very easy po.
Sige po, maraming salamat po muli, attorney.
Maraming salamat po, Attorney Pamitan and Mr. Punsa. Para po sa pagpa-file po ng mga complaint, nasa chat box po ang website po ng DTI. And to proceed po, may naka-raise hand po, Mr. Eriverto. You may unmute po to raise your question po. To ask your question, sir. Hello, sir.
Hello. Marinig niyo ako?
Clear naman po, sir. Loud and clear, sir.
Okay. Ma'am, ang tanong ko po yung I think I heard na parang may bagong Consumer Act. It was proposed or submitted by DTI to Congress. Pero ano nangyari doon? Anong nangyari? May update ba o inaksyonan ba 'yun ng Congress or wala? Yan lang po ang tanong ko, ma'am.
Yung ano po, yung sir, sorry po, medyo hindi po ako expert dun sa internet transactions pero yung Consumer Act po, yung Internet Transactions Act po is hindi po siya replacement or it's another law po. It's another law. And the law creating another bureau sa DTI, no, the e-commerce bureau. So basically ngayon, dalawa na yung mag-handle ng mga complaints, parang ganun, no? So parang dinagdagan. Yung batas po ng Internet Transactions Act na sign po into law around December 5 or 4 po siya. Last year, no? So ganap na po siyang batas. Yun nga lang, nakalagay po kasi sa batas na mayroong tinatawag na transitory period po. Na in 18 months po, no? So na-sign na po siya, ganap na po siyang batas. So ito po ay karagdagan po na batas para protektahan po yung consumer. So dun sa yung just to give you a bit of a contrast po, no. Yung Consumer Act po, pag nakabili tayo ng peke, nakabili tayo ng depektibong produkto, parang ganun, no. Ang pag magfa-file po kayo ng complaint for violation of the consumer, ang gagawin po ni DTI, Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau, ito po yung bureau namin, pag nakita ko talaga namin na peke yung binenta o defective yung binenta, ipapa-refund po namin yung pera. Yung Internet Transactions Act naman po, ang trabaho naman po niya, pag nakita na itong mga website na to ay nagbebenta ng peke, ang mangyayari po, pwede po gawin at may reklamo, may kaukulang proseso na napatunayan na may paglabag sa Internet Transactions Act. Ang gagawin po ngayon ng DTI, yung sabi ko kanina, iba-blacklist yung website, yung nagbebenta, or iti-take down po. Ibig sabihin, hindi na ho sila makapagbenta via the internet. Ganun po yung, yun po yung parang function ng dalawang batas. So hindi po sila, there are separate laws, two separate laws with different functions. But ultimately, the goal is to protect consumers and give them the kind of redress para hindi humaabuso. So yung isa po para hindi na makapagbenta, yung isa naman pag may nabenta ka na, pipilitin natin siya na obligahin na ibalik kung sakaling depektibo o peke yung binenta. So ganun po yung function sila.
Thank you po, Attorney. Maraming salamat po. And thank you rin po, Mr. Heriberto, for your question po. We now proceed po to our next question. Received online po. Question po from Mr. Paul Adrian Madriaga. How to deal those sellers over online e-commerce platforms engaging in a form of deceptive practice through misuse of trademarks?
In so far as trademarks kasi is concerned po, no, well, dalawa po, no. Ang trademark kasi or even copyright, these are rights po ng IP owner, intellectual property rights owner, or yung trademark owner or yung brand owner. Like say for example, Nike, Adidas, those are brands po, no, trademark sila. So, ang pwede lang ko kasi magreklamo doon is yung brand owner kasi yung karapatan niya bilang owner ng trademarks na yon, siya lang po pwedeng mag-complain. Pero si consumer naman po, hindi kagaya nga po, sabi ko nga po, kung peke yon, ginamit lang yung trademark na ganyan. Pag si consumer nakabili, pwede po siyang magreklamo sa DTI if napatunayan po nga na illegal po, ibig sabihin na counterfeit po yung produkto or fake yung produkto. So, pwede yan magreklamo sa DTI. But I think po, no, in the past po, there has been a parang MOA po, no. This one was spearheaded by IPOPHIL, Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines. meron po silang tinatawag na Memorandum of Agreement or Understanding with the online platforms. Doon po sa MOA na po na yun, yung mga platforms nangako ho sila na pag may magrereklamo ng mga brand owners tungkol doon sa, like say for example, illegal use ng mga trademarks na yan, yung platforms po will have to take down yung mga sellers po na yan. So in fact, meron dun sa mga platforms po ngayon, merong mechanism within the platform where you can report yung mga counterfeit products, and if it's found that the products are counterfeit, or if the seller cannot prove the authenticity of the product, then the platforms will take it down po. So yung I think signatory po dito yung Shopee, Lazada, Zalora, the big platforms, and some other platforms po. So but again, sabi ko nga po, but because it's a trademark violation, it's really an IP issue po, cognizable by the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines, or pwede kasi mag-file din ng criminal case po yan sa korte. So yun po, it's really a IP issue. Yun. So it's but again, sabi ko nga, kung ang issue po is nakabili ka ng peke, then pwede pong magreklamo sa DTI para po ipa-refund natin at pabalik yung produkto. Hindi na balik kasi peke yun. So, papa-order natin na refund kasi binenta sa may peke po. So,
Thank you again, Attorney Pamitan. For our next question naman po. Question po from Mr. Chris. Paano po yung price indicated in the tag that is different the price when scanned at the counter or the cashier, sir?
So under the Consumer Act po, no, if there are two price, no, sabi sa batas, kailangan ibigay mo yung mas mababa na presyo sa consumer. So yun po, hindi pwedeng magreklamo yung nagbebenta dahil pagkakamali na yung paglagay ng dalawang tag mo. So ang penalty niya for doing that is he has to give the price na lower price. So kung hindi po sinunod yan ng kung hindi po sinunod yan ng establishmento, maaari po kayong magreklamo sa DTI, kaya sinabi natin na proseso. Mag-file po kayo ng complaint, at kung napatunayan talaga natin na dalawa yung price tag at hindi niya binigay mas mababang presyo, ang gagawin po ni DTI, orderan po natin siya na ibigay yung refund ng difference ng binayaran mo. So halimbawa, ang price tag is 50 at 100, ang binigay sa'yo is 100, so ibibigay dapat sa yung 50, kasi 50 lang dapat kasi yun yung mas mababa na presyo. At the same time, pwede pong i-penalize ni DTI yung establishmento din, administrative fine, for despite very clear sa batas natin, kailangan ibigay niya mas mababa, hindi pa rin niya binigay, pinahirapan niya yung consumer. So DTI has the option to impose an additional administrative fine for such violation. That's why nga we encourage talaga yung mga establishments, whether online or brick and mortar, na kung sakali na ganun, dalawang price tag, ibigay na nila yung mas mababa na presyo kasi yun po yung nakasaad din sa atin.
Maraming salamat po, Attorney Pamitan. Time check lamang po, it's already 11:30 a.m. Last question na lang po from our participants. We apologize that we can only accommodate few questions po because of our limited time. For our next question po, Attorney, from Jolex, please provide the example of DTI complaint from consumer and how was it resolved by DTI consumer po?
So, example nun, yung nakita natin kanina sa slides, no? So, yung Auto-Centrum case, no? So, yun, if I may repeat yung for purposes of answering yung question, no? So, dun sa case na yun, sinabi ni Auto-Centrum na yung kotse nila ay bago. So, binili ngayon ng mag-asawa na spouse Bernardo yung kotse. Ngunit nung nirehistro nila sa LTO, nalaman nila na may nauna na palang pagmamay-ari. So, napatunayan dun sa kaso na itong binenta pala na kotse ay hindi pala brand new. At ito ay contrary to dun sa claim ni Auto Centrum na brand new motor vehicle yon. So dahil under Article 50, pag claim mo na brand new, brand new siya at hindi naman siya brand new, that's a violation of the Consumer Act po, Article 50. So, deceptive sales po siya. So, anong ginawa po ni Korte Suprema? Sabi po ni Korte Suprema doon sa decision, una, nag-decide na po yung DTI talaga doon. No? Sabi namin na may violation nga siya, pinarefund yung buong amount nung binayaran. In-appeal po niya yung kaso, umabot po hanggang Korte Suprema. Tapos in-affirm po tayo ni Supreme Court doon sa decision. Tama niya. Sabi ni Supreme Court, tama si DTI. Dapat i-refund mo yung buong amount. In fact, in that particular case, the Supreme Court was very generous and said na hindi lang yung amount na binayaran. So let's say for example lang po na hindi ito yung totoong amount. So about 1 million po yung amount ng refund. Sabi ni Supreme Court, magbayad ka pa ng additional na 6% interest. So, ganun. So, ito po is a classic example of a case decided by DTI reaching the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court affirming the decision of the DTI. And dito, na ibalik po yung pera na pinambili, na i-refund po yung pera ng consumer. So, that's how DTI was able to help that particular consumer. So, it's a Supreme Court case. And some other cases po, we've had several cases decided by the Supreme Court affirming yung DTI decisions. So that's just one example.
Thank you po, Attorney Pamitan. For our next question po, from Food at Iba Pack Catering Services, Mr. Jairus Mahayhay. Good day. What is the action or protocol that a consumer shall do once he found out that the actual price of a particular product in a mall was different versus the promotional price?
So, alam po natin no, na normally pag yung mga establishments na yan are Bagwis awardee, no, which are award given by CPAB and yung mga regional operations group natin, okay, at DTI for that matter. Alam nila po na meron sila consumer welfare desk po normally. So, ang gagawin mo dapat pag ikaw yung consumer, lumapit ka mismo dun sa consumer welfare desk. At alam namin pag Bagwis awardee yan, talaga makita nila na makita nila na may discrepancy, talagang aayusin naman na po agad-agad nila. I don't think na with the clearly overwhelming evidence against two conflicting price tags, dapat actionan na po nila agad dyan. Yun po yung gagawin mo, lumapit ka sa consumer welfare desk or lumapit sa manager and isangguni po sa kanila yun. Ngayon, kung talaga pong hindi nila actionan, I think that's the time na you go to DTI. Pag nagreklamo naman kayo sa DTI, normally ginagawa namin, pag Bagwis award rin yan, pinapadala na agad namin ng notice requiring them within a certain period of time within which to address yung problem. And normally, I think na-address naman po yung agad-agad yung mga bagay. Pero pag hindi po talaga, then pasok po, susunod na po yung consumer complaints handling mechanism natin wherein your mediation, adjudication, yun. But I think pag mga ganyan po na, I think that normally the stores, yung establishment are normally immediately addresses yung mga bagay niya. Kasi alam naman nila na hindi sila, kumbaga, hindi sila mananalo against sa consumer in such kinds of complaints.
Thank you again, Attorney Pamitan. For our last question, sir, from DTI Baguio, Mr. Jerome Rojas. Good day, sir. Can we hold e-marketplaces liable for violation of the Consumer Act for acts of sellers or scammers in the marketplace or platform? If yes, what could be our basis po? Thank you.
The legal service and the DTI secretary in the past has rendered decisions that even before the passage of the internet transactions where clearly the liability of the platforms, e-marketplaces are being spelled out. Sa consumer app po, meron po talaga silang liability doon. No? So, there was once a legal service opinion also and in some cases decided by ang turing kasi natin doon sa mga e-marketplaces or yung mga platforms or parang sila yung mga supplier. So you remember, yung advertisements are done via dun sa app nila. So yung app nila yung advertisements on do sa product that are being sold are via the For example, the apps, di ba? May apps ang mga platforms. So, pag magbabayad ka, may Shopee Pay, may Lazada e-wallet, dumadaan yung pera sa kanila. So, meaning, they are part of the consumer transaction without which yung participation nila, yung transaction could not have been consummated. So, they cannot now say that they are not liable and say na, hindi, platform lang kami. No. Why? Because the advertisements were done via the apps, via your platform. Number 2, the money passed through yung platforms. Again. And yun, may porsyento rin ho sila dun sa transaction. So nakinabang sila. So ibig sabihin, part sila nung nagbebenta, kasama sila. Hindi man sila actual nagbebenta, but they stand to be benefited by that consumer transaction. So you cannot now feign liability by saying we're not the seller. So we have had several decisions po sa FTEB where we imposed yung penalty of 300,000 for each consumer transaction against yung mga online platforms. But I think with the internet transactions again, but again, I have to say hindi part ng topic yung internet transaction, but I keep repeating it and I do apologize for that. But ngayon, with the internet, it's very clear now kung anong liability ng mga platforms. I think it's very clearly spelled out there. So, I think, sir, very clear na may liability ang platforms. As in fact, kung hindi kasi, pag talaga silang walang liability, they would have not refunded, they would have not replaced mga articles that were bought dun sa platform nila if clearly they think that they're not liable.
Thank you again, Atty. Pangitan. Nag-raise hand po si Mr. Jerome. You may unmute po, sir.
Yes, hello. Thank you po. Just a follow-up po, attorney. Since you mentioned dapat the platform, they facilitate the transaction like payment. But whereas po kasi sa Facebook Marketplace, usually the buyer and the seller ang sila mismo. Can we still go after, like for example, can we still hold Facebook Marketplace liable? Kasi hindi na sila nagfa-facilitate ng payment. If so po, and may basis po ba? And thank you, sir. Thank you.
I think sabi ko, if you look at yung answer ko kasi yung liability is based on dun sa participation. So I think it's on a case-to-case basis also. If it's very clear that yung other part, the one being sued or the one being complained of has clearly no participation whatsoever in the transaction, then I don't think that it's also proper, justifiable, and legal under the circumstances to pin liability on such entity, no. So I think it's again, ang sabi ko, the reason why they have liability, sabi ko nga, these platforms are in the nature of a supplier, contemplated under the Consumer Act, no? Supplier, manufacturer, ganun po na klase ng liability, plus yung actual participation. So it really depends also kung ano yung extent ng participation. But again, sabi ko nga, sir, with the internet transactions, because remember that the Consumer Act also was passed during the time na wala pa tayong internet, but those are being properly used by the e-commerce law and e-commerce law and ngayon yung internet transactions act. So with the current law, I don't think that there should be a doubt as to dun sa liability nila. So moving forward, yun. But for past transactions, it would be on a case-to-case basis. And again, sabi nga natin sa DTI, tayo naman, while we are pro-consumers, hindi naman pwede sabihin na pag kinaso may platform, automatic na may liability. As adjudication officer, it is our obligation also to look into the evidence and really evaluate yung evidence and clearly if there's walang participation, then I don't think that there should be liability on the part of, kasi at the end of the day, we're required to dispense justice naman, hindi naman tayo trade and industry pa rin tayo. So we encourage yung growth ng e-commerce, ng businesses, but at the same time protect consumers. Yun, maraming salamat and naimbag na bigat mo, sir.
Again, thank you po ulit, Attorney Pamitan. We apologize po na di na po namin ma-accommodate yung ibang questions because of our limited time. Maraming salamat po sa lahat ng participants na nagtanong at maraming salamat po, Attorney Pamitan, for answering all the questions. We hope na marami pong natutunan ang ating participants for today's webinar. Before we close this session, we would like to request Attorney Venida and Attorney Pamitan to give a short message to our participants and share with them Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau contact details para sa kanila pang other concerns. Attorney Venida and Attorney Pamitan. Any short message po?
As I said earlier, we hope the discussion was able to enlighten us with regards to what constitutes deceptive sales act and practices. And if you have any concern, issue or query, our contact details are, please email us at consumercare@dti.gov.ph. Yun lang po.
Maraming salamat po, Attorney Venida. Attorney Pamitan po, any short message po to our participants?
Lumapas na po si Attorney Pamitan, ma'am.
Again, thank you po ulit. Maraming salamat po sa ating speaker for today, Attorney Alejandro and Attorney Pamitan at sa Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau sa pagpapaunlak sa aming imbitasyon ngayong umaga upang talakayin ang Deceptive Sales Act and Practices. Before we close this session po, we would like to invite everyone to tune in to Consumer at Iba Pa every Saturday at 8:30 a.m. at Super Radio DZBB, BTV at GTV, and Consumer at Iba Pa Facebook live stream. This is to formally close our webinar for today. At mula po sa Consumer Protection Group, maraming salamat po sa ating mga participants na nakasama natin ngayong umaga. Huwag niyo pong kalimutang samahan kaming muli sa aming mga susunod na webinars. Our announcement will be posted in our social media accounts. For more updates, please like, follow, and subscribe to our Thank you so much, everyone.